All right. Welcome, everyone who's joined us today. And thank you very much for spending the next 45 minutes with us on the topic of practically engaging with AI. My name is Patrick Hua. I'll be running the webinar today, and I run the Tech Lead Academy, where I offer both in-person and virtual training for technical leaders and engineering managers, and coach CTOs and VPs of engineering. And I'm very excited to be partnering with Lead Dev because we have something exciting in view. So Lead Dev will be returning to Berlin in December, where I'll be your host. Our awesome panelists will also be speakers at the event. So if you hear some of the different topics that they'll touch upon today, come along and you'll hear some more of their talks in a lot more detail. There are still tickets available. So if you'd like to join us, head over to leaddev.com to get a ticket. And that's not it. As an extra thank you for you registering for this webinar, we're also offering 20% off the standard ticket price with the code LDBerlin20. And you have until November 23rd to use that code. And alongside Lead Dev, there are some workshops, and one of the workshops on offer will be my Tech Lead Skills for Developers. So if you'd like to join me there, head over to the Lead Dev Berlin website to secure your spot today for the conference or the workshop. But back to our webinar, today's panel will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack to answer some of your questions in the Lead Dev-Berlin channel. We may also have some time, I hope, to answer a couple of questions live. So please do submit them through the Q&A feature on Zoom. And we'll try to get to at least a couple of them towards the end. Any of the ones that we don't, we'll also try to once again address in the Lead Dev Berlin Slack channel at the end of the webinar. So let's get started with some of the introductions for the panelists. And I'm very excited to be joined by Birgitte Bockler from ThoughtWorks, Maria Gomez Guerra from BCGX, and Olalekan Alessin from HRS Group. So they have lots of experiences and ideas to share. So I'd like to briefly ask each person to give us a brief introduction. So let's start with Lekan.
Right, thanks a lot, Pat. My name is Olalekan Alessin. I am the Director of Data Platform and Data Architect at HRS, leading multiple software and data teams, and also a machine learning hero for AWS. Thank you, and nice to meet you all.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Over to Birgitte.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Birgitte Bockler. I'm a technical principal with ThoughtWorks in Berlin, Germany. And the reason why I'm here today in this panel is that my current role is the global lead for AI-assisted software delivery in ThoughtWorks, where I kind of act as a catalyst and evangelist among all the software delivery practitioners in ThoughtWorks. And, you know, I do research, amplify our experiments and learnings, anything to do with using Gen AI to improve software delivery.
Fantastic. Welcome. And over to Maria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Gomez. I'm a Vice President of Engineering at BCGX, part of the Boston Consulting Group. We build and advise corporations and organizations on how to use technology to advance in the products or in the business. In the last 6 to 9 months, I've done have a lot of conversations around Gen AI, and also led a few teams creating POCs and also builds that are currently in production. Very
fantastic. Yeah, wonderful. It's a great spread of experience, lots of different sort of perspectives, and really interested in hearing some of your experience and insights today. So let's talk about a topic, practically engaging with AI. So although the field of AI has been around for a long time, it seems to have really kicked off in the mainstream, especially with very practical and accessible platforms like GitHub's Copilot, Midjourney, and of course, it's hard not to talk about ChatGPT. Many people and organizations are definitely asking, what are the long-term consequences? So what does it mean for my job? What does it mean for my tasks and the work? And today, I certainly hope the panelists can give us a little bit of a taster as to practical ways teams and people are engaging with AI today. So let's start a little bit with maybe each of your different organizations and departments, because I know every organization has their own risk appetite. So let's go through each of your organizations, and maybe you can give us a bit of a description around your current company's thoughts with AI. So Pagita, let's start with you, who works for ThoughtWorks. And ThoughtWorks is a consulting company. So how are you approaching this for yourselves and for your clients?
Yeah, exactly. We're a consultancy. So, and I think, Maria works with like startups a lot, and Olalekan works in a product company. So I think we probably have all different environments of how we approach this. And in our case, so we work with lots of clients around the world on, helping them build software, build technology strategies, build, digital transformation strategies, stuff like that. And so what we did is like 4 to 5 months ago, we appointed a chief AI officer, who is my boss, Mike Mason. And he basically has a team that is trying to, kind of streamline a lot of AI and particularly, of course, Gen AI related things. And we're kind of looking at it in like 3 buckets. So one of them is, of course, accelerating adoption of this into our service offerings, into our work with our clients, right? So how can we better help them apply generative AI to their business and to their products? And then the second bucket is to kind of this idea of evolution of software delivery to be AI assisted. So, and that's the one that I'm most focused on, right? Like the most obvious part of this is coding assistance, like with tools like GitHub Copilot, but there's like lots more around that we're looking into. And then the third bucket, but also last bucket, is kind of internally, right? Like how are we actually, improving our business, our staffing, our marketing, knowledge management, and so on. And I would say in all of these cases, like our priority number 1 is to use it in real world scenarios, right? Like to get beyond the POC, to get beyond the little party trick demos that everybody's doing, but really see if you embed it in a whole process, in a whole user journey of somebody delivering software, for example, what does actually work and what is just like a little, a little thing, right? And in terms of the risk appetite, like, so we think this is like, and again, I'm talking specifically now from my perspective of AI-assisted software delivery. While there is a lot of hype, we really think this is very real, and this is really going to have significant impact on how we deliver software. And we want to help, do our part in figuring out how to do this safely and really effectively, right? So we really want to go as fast as possible with this. And, we recently had a talk by somebody external, I forgot her name right now, and asking her about, what's a good speed, how to know that you're going fast enough. And she was saying, go as fast as you can without eroding trust with your clients and customers. And I think it's like a nice kind of little mantra to think about the priority of how fast to go.
Great. So interesting with the chief AI officer, and that nice little heuristic as well is a good thing probably for all the people listening to the webinar today to take note of. Let's go over to Lakan, because your company is a product company. So maybe you could do a brief intro as to what HRS Group does, and maybe your current organization's approach to AI.
All right. So HRS Group is a product company, like you said. We're in the business travel space. And we have a mission to simplify how businesses stay, work, and pay. So when the stay, which is the hotel experience, when the pay, digitizing payments for business travel, and also in the work where you can reserve flexible workspaces, right? And if you look at that, the mission is quite simple. It's simplify how businesses stay, work, and pay. And in that mission, you figure out what can technology do to enable us to satisfy our customer expectations or deliver on customer outcomes. And I think generative AI plays into that space where it can simplify a lot of things. But if you boil that down into what we actually do, so from internal operations to software engineering or software development, or even putting software into production, there's a lot of, across the software or product delivery value chain, right? There's a lot of places where generative AI plays a part. And part of my job is to evangelize the adoption of it. Part of my job is also to demonstrate how to use it. And part of my job is also to see where does it fit into our customer outcomes, right? And customer outcome number 1 for us is data trust, right? And data privacy, because we work with Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, and this is the thing that they always look at, right? And that's how we balance risk, which we try to move as fast, like Birgitte said, we try to move as fast as possible, putting into consideration or putting in front of us how do we make sure that we earn and keep on maintaining customer trust with regards to data? This is very, very important. Everything else comes after. And personally, this is also my personal opinion, because I've built AI platforms somewhere. I've been part of building the data platform. I think people underestimate. I think a lot of times data privacy or having customer trust when it comes to data usage is very, very important. And in leveraging any form of technology, right, putting that at the forefront doesn't hinder innovation. And this I have been evangelizing to my teams. And for me, it's now becoming, everybody's getting it, that this doesn't actually hinder innovation. In fact, it fosters innovation for us to think, how can we make sure that we ensure customer trust, we maintain customer trust with regards to how we use their data, and still innovate on their behalf to help them to elevate their experiences and also deliver better outcomes for them. Yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Fantastic. And exciting to also play that role of evangelizing within your own organization. I can imagine you have lots of touch points with different parts of your company.
Definitely.
Let's go over to Maria. So I understand BCGX was previously BCG Digital Ventures or Ventures. So it's often involved probably building new products companies. So do you see a lot of ventures now to use AI? And maybe can you give us a bit of a picture from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. I think I would say that most of the conversations that I have with either CTOs or CEOs of established startups or a scale up, or even with founders that are thinking about creating their next startup, had somehow have the concept or the idea of AI in their mind. They obviously are different maturity levels, and you have people who have a very, I guess, developed idea of what AI and GenAI can do for their idea or their business, if that startup is already functioning. And in some other cases, you might have an organization that is trying to create a new business line, for example, and they feel that maybe GenAI or AI can accelerate that thought and that avenue. So yes, it's been a lot of those conversations happening in the last 6 to 12 months. I think, as you mentioned on the beginner parts, the last year has lowered the bar considerably in terms of access to technology, to tools, the price in which we can get those capabilities, and it's just easy to get yourself and others excited. What I've been doing and what BCGX try to do is to help clients to really understand what the potential value of AI is in the products, or in the organization, or in the ambition. And we've been doing it in very different ways, right? So I've been involved in conversation and building more advanced customer-facing sales assistants that are really trying to mimic the human interaction and go past just a glorified filtering, right? We have also done some work around hyper-personalization campaigns that are supported by automation and creation of assets and content. And we have also worked with healthcare organizations and providers on the use of GenAI and AI for research and treatments and stuff. And that has a whole other set of things to think about: compliance, risk, privacy of data, of course. So this is also something that I emphasize a lot. This is not a simple journey. This is not just, you wake up one day and say, I'm going to GenAI the hell out of my business. There are regulations, there are guardrails that need to be implemented, especially in highly regulated industries. There's ethics that come into play on how this technology is shaping the organization, shaping our ways of working, how we build products, etc. Yeah.
Great. I'd love to follow that thread a little bit, actually, with you, Maria, because I heard one thing that you're doing is helping your clients understand what perhaps some of this can and cannot do. And I mean, for me, I'm also still struggling or learning a lot more about what a lot of these tools can do. But you've probably worked with lots of business people or people who imagine it can just solve everything, right? Suddenly we don't need developers. We can just like generate everything or, do lots of things. How do you find a balance? And I don't know, can you give us an example about how you find, managing some of those expectations with perhaps less technical people?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think it's all boils down to really understand what is that they, what are the outcomes that you want to get out of any product, right? It doesn't matter of whether you're using AI or you're using a spreadsheet, right? But really understanding what the goals are and then see how is the most efficient or the better way to get to those outcomes, right? And in some cases, it might be Gen AI. In some other cases, it might not be, right? So in one example, like a couple of months ago, I was working with this organization that is in the consumer space. They have they own a bunch of products in their market, and they wanted to start like looking into, how they could create some more engaging platforms and I guess mobile applications in this case, right, to kind of build that relationship or strengthen that relationship with the customer, right? And one of the things was, we can create this kind of party planner that help you to figure out what is the, depending on your guest, you can prompt what is the mood of the party, and then it can help you to like craft a menu or craft a cocktail menu as well. And so that was very cool ideas, right? And it was a very nice like ideation sprint that we did with them, and we're actually building something with them. But at some point, some of the ideas were like, yeah, maybe Gen AI can help you to create like the shopping list. And I would have, well, you don't need Gen AI to create a list of items that you need to buy, right? So this is a very clear example. I think, you very quickly realize that you don't need that advance or that amount of computation just to say, you need to go and get milk. But I think it boils down into, really understanding what you want to get out of that, and then see what are the tools that will get you that in the most efficient way. Yeah.
That's fantastic. What I'm hearing there, once again, practical sort of example is that sort of idea of like, it's another thing in your toolkit of the implementation. You really still have to go back to that, perhaps that product engineering side of that, really, what outcome are they really trying to reach for?
Yeah.
Great. So one thing that you also touched upon that I'd like to maybe broaden out a little bit is, that there are lots of new tools on the market, right? So I remember recently I want to do some video editing. I thought, oh, this is a great example of outsourcing this to AI. So let me have a look around what tools are there for sort of automatically processing a video clip and maybe coming up something that I could then share on social. And there were a lot of them, and a lot of them did feel a little bit in very alpha sort of stages. And I think one of the things that we all probably feel in technology is that FOMO, or fear of missing out, right? So we don't know the latest and greatest, and we have a bit of a responsibility if we're going to help our sort of stakeholders manage some of those things of knowing what is maybe the best and sort of useful things out there. And so maybe I'll cast this question to Birgitta, because ThoughtWorks is known for their tech radar around helping people navigate that. So maybe you can explain that concept and maybe help us understand maybe what blips or things have appeared from an AI perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, being part of a consulting company with 12,000 people gives me the privilege of having access to this huge hive mind, right? As we always call it, right? So there's lots of engagement with each other going on in like chat spaces and stuff like that, right? And actually before this panel, I looked up like just over the last 3 months in the two main spaces where we talk about AI-assisted software delivery and Gen AI in general, there were 590 links shared and about 150 messages per week. And so if let's say it's 500 unique links, if you just spend 3 minutes on each, that's 25 hours, right? Some of them will be videos. It's just insane, right? So my approach has been like, I mean, one thing is I try to put a lens on it. Like what's most important for me is anything related to software delivery, right? Then I dump stuff into a Drive folder, so I don't always have to look at it immediately. I have a huge chaotic mural with stuff because I'm a very visual person, and that's how I find things again. I try to just like go with the flow and not like get that FOMO too much. Like I know I can't read everything. So, that's, I think, important to not have that stress level. And I've also know a few other people in the company whose view and kind of focus I trust. And I kind of prioritize what they're sharing, right? And then, of course, all of that hive mind gets distilled into our technology radar, which we publish twice a year, and everybody proposes things for that. And the last edition that we published, it actually broke our process a little bit because we had over 60 proposals out of 350 for things that were Gen AI related. And usually we just look at each blip individually, each entry, and then because it's not a comprehensive market research, right? But in this case, we actually had to look at all of those proposals, cluster them, see if the big picture works. And we've never had to do that before. And so, yeah, it was like mainly things like anything related to retrieval augmented generation, right? This like kind of new approach to use Gen AI, but also your own data sources. So, you know, things like LangChain, Llama Index, semantic kernel, vector databases, you know, that kind of space. And then it was anything about hosting, self-hosting, fine-tuning, quantizing models. And then in the AI-assisted software delivery space specifically, it was coding assistants, of course, and even like some stuff, how you can build your own coding assistant, even though that might not always make sense, but yeah.
Great. One thing I didn't hear you say is explaining what is how the radar is organized. So I understand that there's sort of 4 areas.
Yeah.
And maybe you can give an example of like what is currently maybe in one of those quadrants from the examples you gave.
Yeah. I mean, our 4 kind of rings are adopt for like, you know, if you have this problem, absolutely use this. There's nothing in the Gen AI space right now that we put in adopt because it's just way too early. And then there's as well assess and trial. So trial is we've actually seen this successful in production or in like a productive kind of use case. And assess is just like, you know, we're monitoring this looks interesting. Most of the Gen AI stuff is in assess. In trial, there's GitHub Copilot because we're using that at 35 clients at this point. So we definitely have enough experience to say, yeah, this is a solid product. I think we also have in trial, there's not much in trial. There's probably also just like using ChatGPT and you know, stuff like that. But everything is assess at the moment, right? To be honest.
Right. So early sort of early stage still is what I'm hearing. Let's talk about, you know, we've talked a little bit how your organizations are approaching AI. I'd like to hear about your personal experience, so the sort of practical side of how are some of these things affecting your perhaps day to day. So I'm curious as to, do you have ChatGPT always open or are you using some other tool on a sort of daily basis? Let's first hear from Lacan.
All right, thanks a lot, Pat. So usually, for now, I don't have ChatGPT always open anymore. But I prefer to use the Hugging Face chat actually, because it comes with a lot of, I can select that kind of model that I want in there. But personally, I use it for almost anything. So first, I also use the Amazon Bedrock just for me. So I have one of my open source tools, which is a query editor for Athena. And then last weekend, I just decided, let me put Bedrock in there so someone can have, let's say, natural language interaction with the data or the data lake and say, please prepare me a query that is doing this. And it actually works. So it's part of my open source project. Hopefully that will be shipped in a couple of weeks. That's one of the ways I use it. I also use it so I had one interaction with one of our people development colleagues at the company recently, and they were going through tons of surveys, right? And this is why I think practically engaging AI goes beyond software delivery. And we had to process tons of survey responses, and they wanted to classify it across, let's say, the onboarding journey for new colleagues. And by our assessment, right, this would have taken her maybe 8 hours of work, or taken the person 8 hours of work. Using Gen AI, I think this one we used Bedrock, it took us maybe 1 hour, right? And we were able to map every response across different phases of our onboarding journey and then identify where to improve based on this tool. So this is one of the ways, this is part of the ways that I engage with it. I think I also use it in preparing strategy documents. So this, one of the things that I also think is that technology leaders, we need to engage Gen AI from a different perspective, not just from, oh yeah, we need to use it to improve our software delivery, but also use it to think about how do we want to go? Because this is wisdom of the crowd, right? This is better than one expert. And this is wisdom of the crowd put all together into some machine learning model through different techniques. I use it in formulating strategy, and you will be surprised how much of the things that people think I'm really smart, right? I'm definitely smart, but for me, even using this makes me even come out smarter. And one of the things that I plan to also use it for is when I'm having my what's this thing called quarterly reviews with my reporting lines. And then people have given them 360 feedback. I'm planning to use it to say, show me how this person can develop over the next couple of months or years based on the feedback that he or she has gotten from people that he or she is working with. And this is for me how I'm engaging it really on a daily basis to see how can I be more productive and how can I also enable the people that report to me or also the engineers that are working with me to be more productive. And this is how I use it on a daily basis. Apart from that, let's say recently I was asking it, what kind of, come up with drafts on how I can improve stem cell research, right? These are things that I think about out of the blue.
Fascinating, fascinating. Really interesting examples. Let's hear maybe from Maria next.
I guess, I mean, ChatGPT is not that it's always open, but I go to ChatGPT quite often. I think it's similar to what has been said. It's more of like refining the message if there's something that needs to be maybe shared more widely. So I'm the chapter lead for the Europe and South America region. So that means that I had sometimes to send emails to many engineers. It's always good to have ChatGPT to kind of maybe be more concise or more to the point on that communication. I also do use some of the tools, so depending on the project I might be working on, more involved in. So lately I've been involved quite heavily on Google and the Vertex AI platforms. I had used the code generations tool to kind of like do prompting and do very early feedback of what we were trying to do with our chatbots, and that can give me much faster feedback than if I'm doing it in the code, for example, and to do very, very, I guess, ad hoc testing of that prompting. Also, I mean, I'm still part of BCG, so this is a consultancy that does a lot of PowerPoints, and they communicate with many stakeholders through PowerPoints. BCG has started to create its own like kind of tech creator tool that uses LLMs to actually give a bit of a structure for that tech. That really gets you a lot of the boilerplate that you will always need to put in those slides, and that can help me, but mostly the business consultants to actually focus on the really important and a more I guess mentally demanding task of their day-to-day job. And yeah, for me it's also helpful sometimes. So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for walking us through some of the impact. Let's go over to Birgitta and see how you're using sort of AI tools on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I mean, first, maybe I think it's interesting because in my job, I also see it as my job to try Gen AI for like lots of things, even if I first think it's ridiculous, right? Because it's kind of my job, right? So kind of like I try to take an AI first approach to some of my tasks. And even though this has been my role for 4 months, I find it hard to do that mindset shift. It's really interesting because, you know, we're good at some of the things we're doing after a while, and it just seems easier to just do it that same way, right? So that's something to keep in mind, I think, especially then for people who are not immersed in this every day. If it's already hard for me to do that mindset shift, right? It's something to keep in mind that we're actually cognitively in a shift here of using this, right? So don't dismiss it too early, I would say. And in terms of maybe 2 examples, I just recently did a business trip and had extended it with a long weekend and didn't know where to go. And I actually ended up in a place that ChatGPT suggested to me. I described to it kind of like what type of place I wanted to go to. And interestingly, I would say in my day-to-day work life, I probably use Copilot, GitHub Copilot the most. First, because I have like a few POCs or like little applications that I'm working on also to evaluate coding assistants. And I use the chat all the time just to quickly figure out how do I do that in this language that I've never used before? And the information discovery is just so much faster for me. And I also use GitHub Copilot for writing, actually, for writing blog posts, for writing technology radar blips, because it gives me this experience of finishing my sentence, suggesting the next paragraph, which I find a lot more fluid than going to ChatGPT, prompting, or, other interaction modes. So I use it for writing a lot, actually.
Fascinating. Not quite the use case that one would expect from Copilot.
Can I add something to that? So what Birgitta said earlier about the mindset shift. So I remember I was in a coaching session with one of the my team members. And this person, I had to give the person feedback that you need to be more empathetic when you're sending emails. And the person was like, yeah, I prefer to be very efficient and direct in my communication. I said, I understand, but you have to also understand that the receiver of that information might translate it differently. So what you can do is, if you are sending an email, write it the way you understand it and just go to this tool and say, please rewrite this email in a more empathetic way. And to be honest, it was quite a cognitive shift for the person, because the person said, is this even possible? And I said, yeah, I do this a lot. And I think the cognitive shift also needs to happen, because there's a reskilling that we also need to do with colleagues, with our fellow colleagues, with regards to engaging or practically engaging this new technology.
Great example. And you're right. I think the shift in habits, if things are working, it's hard to shift those working patterns that you have. So then once we experiment with something, well, you need to see a substantial gain. So thank you, Bagita and Lacan, for really pointing that out. Let's go to a topic that I know a lot of people are personally worried about with the practical engagement. So I think one hope and maybe fear that people have is that AI will make software engineers obsolete or significantly more productive. So I definitely hear from managers, it's like, why do we need a big team? We now have a lot of AI, right? So can't we just do that with half the team or even less? So do you have any internal anecdotes or stories that you've seen, given the organizations that you're in, that has maybe impacted team productivity? And maybe in which way? And maybe let's start with Lacan.
Yeah, thanks. I think, number one, I don't think electricity replaced people putting on lanterns, but I think it made them more productive. And to the point that we need to reskill. I don't think it's going to replace software engineers. I think it's going to make engineers more productive. The point is that even if I say, please write me this particular lines of code, that this particular application that does this and that, I need to be able to deploy it. I need to understand how it works. I need to be able to adjust it. There's this terminology in the LLM space called hallucination, right? It might just be writing something that it thinks it's correct, but it's actually not correct. So the engineer then needs to really think through, what problem am I solving and how am I making sure that this is helping me to solve the problem? I don't think it's going to replace engineers. I think it's going to make us more productive. But then even before the engineering or software engineering development, right? How does it help product managers to really brainstorm? How does it help them to break down their ideas into PRD documents, user stories? I think it's really going to elevate the thinking of so many people if we engage it or use it appropriately. That's usually my experience, and that's usually the communication that I share with other non-technical people and also the technical people. I remember one engineer was asking me, so is it going to take our job away? To be honest, I think I was writing a job description recently, and in that job description for an engineer, I put it in there. You must be able to use generative AI for RAP accelerated software development. This is then really reshaping how we hire, how we recruit, or the kind of talent that we expect. So I think it's going to make organizations more efficient in really building software, and you need the context to be able to build the right software. Right? LLM doesn't have the context, even though you can use the RAG or the different techniques, fine-tuning based on your company data, it might still hallucinate, right? So yeah, that's my thought.
Very powerful. Maybe over to Bagita. Do you have any stories that you'd like to share?
Oh, I could talk about this for half an hour. I'll try to make it a bit shorter. So first of all, I think, there's always more to do in software, right? I think just over the last 10 years or so, the work has just gotten more and more. I think security is a great example, because just so many more attack vectors. We need to spend a lot more time on that, right? It seems like there's always more to do, right? So I also don't think it's going to replace anybody anytime soon. And so it's interesting, because now, leaders who are understandably frustrated with the slow speed of custom IT, are like, oh, GitHub says 55% faster task completion, so now I need half the people, right? But of course, coding is just part of the whole process, right? So if you actually have a perfect situation where, with a certain amount of coding in your cycle time, and, you can maybe apply Copilot to 40-50% of your code base, and in those cases, you're 50% faster, then maybe you have a gain of cycle time by 10% or so, right? And cycle time is a difficult metric anyway. It's easy to game. There's lots of variables and factors that come into it, right? But then maybe you're 10% faster in your cycle time. But will you actually notice that? And, with all the variation that cycle time is also subject to, right? And then also you need to look at other variables like quality, test coverage, and so on. We've seen, in terms of anecdotes, we've seen teams where developers who never liked writing tests suddenly started writing tests because it's now faster or easier for them with the coding assistant. And they also need something to tell them if what was generated actually works, right? So then you might not be quite as much faster, but you actually have an increase in test coverage as well. So you reduce the risk for the future, right? So it's, as always, in software delivery and measuring what we're doing, it's like a complicated topic, right? But yeah, I think even though there are risks to quality as well, of course, and they've been written about a lot, I think there's also opportunities for quality, like writing more tests, or just like, giving people faster access to information. And I think the long-term impact on quality, on actual internal quality and extensibility and maintainability, that will remain to be seen, and depends on how a team uses these tools, right?
Fantastic. Maybe I haven't seen any questions come in yet, so audience, we're going to soon run out of time. But as a reminder, any unanswered questions will go into the Slack group, and then our panelists will have a chance to also answer them. But I'd like to maybe fit in one other topic, because for me, I'm hearing a lot more about open source sort of AI tools. And for me, I definitely think that open source really changed the way that we do development. So when I first started, everyone was building their own logging frameworks, their own testing frameworks. And, a lot of open source meant that we could sort of focus on a different level of abstraction. And we're starting to see a lot more of this in the AI tooling space, like Meta's Llama 2, Databricks Dolly, and Stability AI's Stable Diffusion. And so I hope, to a certain degree, it's making it easier for teams to experiment and use AI in their products. And maybe one of you can give an example about how your teams are using these open source tools. And I'll pass that question over to Maria.
Cool. So I can give you an example of something that we did over the summer for this particular client, and that was using an open source LLM. And the reasons why we went for that was that one, this client was in the healthcare industry, was a healthcare provider. I mentioned it before. And obviously that's a very highly regulated industry. There were data that need to be extra protected, obviously, because it's patient information, and it meant that also those LLMs would need to be deployed on premises. So we went for open source LLM as the choice. We spent a big chunk of time to actually doing some assessments of what are the ones that will be more appropriate for that type of thing. We ended up using Falcon and also Llama 2, as you mentioned. We also had to fine-tune that model, and obviously there was a lot of information that needed to be used to that fine-tuning. Interestingly, obviously, not interestingly, I think that will happen regardless. Doing a lot of sanitization of that data and cleaning up the data before fine-tuning was a very tedious but necessary task. But yeah, I mean, the experience was good. We had a very similar experience in terms of developer usability as it is with any other type of LLM. I will say, obviously, because in this particular case, we have it on premise, and that means that you need to be very conscious about how much money you spend, because those things can be very expensive because the amount of GPU that you need to use. But I'm also looking forward and really keeping an eye on not just open source LLM, but also all the tools and the ecosystem that we have around it. So there are things around testings, not just unit testing, but also correctness or completion testing that you can use some very clever open source tools and libraries. And yeah, I think the ecosystem is constantly evolving, and I'm looking forward to see what's coming up in the next, I guess, 3 to 4 months and beyond. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for walking us through that concrete example. And, there's so many different insights that you've all provided. I think for me, there's a lot of interesting takeaways, such as, it's still a relatively early stage for a lot of companies. People are experimenting around this. And it does require this bit of a mindset shift of really wanting to think first of using some of these to see what productivity gains it might bring. I also have a strong sense that it's not going to replace jobs, or at least software engineering jobs anytime soon. So maybe that's going to alleviate some concerns from some of the people attending the webinar today. But there's just lots of things to sort of experiment with. And so a lot of this really comes down to finding the time to actually experiment with some of these things. I really want to thank all of our panelists. But as I mentioned earlier, LeadDev will be back in Berlin on December 4 and 5. And all of our awesome panelists will be speaking at the event. And so maybe to whet your appetite, I'd like to give them each about a minute to maybe give us a bit of a highlight for their talk. So Birgitte, can you explain what you're going to be talking about at LeadDev Berlin?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The title of my talk is AI for Software Development, a Reality Check. And my goal is basically like, I think we're all on the scale somewhere between being like either super excited or super skeptical about this. And then we all fall somewhere in between, right? So I will try to make the super excited people have them come down a little bit back to earth, and the very skeptical people get them a bit more excited. So that will be the goal of my talk. And I basically, walk through like some of the strengths of large language models and connect them to the tasks that we do in software delivery, and not just coding, but also things like story writing and other things, and kind of talk through some examples of, where it can be useful and where maybe not so useful, and things to watch out for, to not step into some of the pitfalls.
I am very much looking forward to seeing that live as well. So thank you very much. Maybe Lacan, can you give us a description of what your talk title is and what you're going to be covering?
Yeah, so interestingly, my talk title is about practical data organization leadership. And these are the things that I learned over time, right? It's going to be talk about how you really, because in the last couple of years, right, we've seen data organizations being affected due to what is going on in tech space recently. And what I've learned over time is how to align data organizations through really, really hardcore prioritization along the value chain to customer delivery. And in this session, I will go from the idea, really, very fuzzy, into then practical details, and then show how to really get started. Because just to add, right, I was at an AWS Hero Summit some time back, and one of the guys we worked together in Nigeria back then, he said, "You are one of the customer-centric engineers that I've ever seen." And this is what I want to share in that, how to make data organizations really, really customer-centric, even though we are engineers. And I'm still an engineer, I still write code.
Love it. And I think more people need that attitude as well. But what I'm also hearing is really a very practical and relevant topic I know a lot of engineering leaders are struggling with, which is like, given the mass of data, given the drive of AI through their organizations, how to structure that. And I look forward to hearing some examples and the practical tips that you're going to give. Maria, can you please give us an overview of what your talk is about and what you're going to be covering?
Sure. So my talk is called Ethics in AI, and I'll be joining with one of my colleagues, Priyanka, and we're going to be tackling the ethics of Gen AI, or some of the ethics of Gen AI. I think there's tons of things to talk about, so I'm not going to go into all of them, but basically we're going to focus in on what are the consequences of the work that we do, or some of the consequences of the work that we do as technologies in the product that we build, and obviously how that has also repercussions in society, like bias or possible discrimination, but also very amazing things that are happening as well due to the power of AI. I think we as technologists, engineers, product managers, etc., right, we have a great privilege to impact the world with technology, but it also comes with a lot of responsibilities that we should be aware of, right? So I do love, as an engineer, I love to do things, play with new stuff. But I also realize that I need to care about what I build, especially when that thing is gonna go into the hands of end users, which is what we all want to do with the thing that we build. So we will explore all of that. We'll share some actionable tips or practices that have been useful for us about how to go about building AI systems that take into consideration end users and all of those affected in between. So we will talk about how you can maybe when you're creating the stories, think about what are the responsible AI implications and put them as part of your non-functional or cross-functional requirements. to what are the guardrails that you should be looking for when building, products or GenAI products. Yeah.
Fantastic. Such an important topic. And I also really look forward to listening to that as well. So thank you very much to all our panelists for the great insights, experience, and stories that you've shared today. We'll all be now heading over to the Lead Dev Slack. So if you'd like to join us with any questions, then please go to the Lead Dev-Berlin channel and post any questions there. And our panelists will take a short moment to answer any ones that they can. And I do hope that some of you will be able to join us in Berlin for Lead Dev Berlin as well. So remember to please book your ticket on the Lead Dev website and use the code LDBerlin20 to get 20% off your ticket price. So thanks for joining us today and hope to see you soon.